Good morning, everyone. Happy Sunday. We have been studying and working on a series of lessons from an amazing and wonderful book called The Concentric Perspective by Eric Butterworth. It's a classic in unity, and I think one of the most powerful in many ways. Eric tends to synthesize a lot of his understanding and teachings in this work. And it really helps us to kind of get a sense of how we can actually shift our own thinking and consciousness in such a way that we are coming into life not from an idea or an awareness of trying to necessarily get something out of life, but to be something for life. And our subject today, and Matthew, I'm getting a little bit of feedback. Can we tone it down just a little bit? Thank you, sir. That sounds a little better. Can you guys still hear me all right? Great. Yes. So our subject today, we have two subjects we're going to kind of talk a little bit today. And both of them really are around this idea of concentrics and what that really means and how it's a practical application of spiritual principle in our lives. And the first one we're going to talk about love today. We're going to talk about work. Isn't that interesting? Two things that you may not think go together, but you may be surprised how they do. And I love the poetry of Hafiz. Many of you are familiar with Hafiz, and I'm going to change this slide right quick. Hafiz, this poem is called "The Subject Tonight is Love." The subject tonight is love for tomorrow night as well. As a matter of fact, I know of no better topic for us to discuss until we all die. There's no better subject for us to discuss, but even more than discussing, I think it's no subject more important for us to be in and participate in and be a part of. I love how children sometimes talk about love. One little child says, "Love is an avalanche where you have to run for your life." Another one says, "Love is the most important thing in the world, but baseball's pretty good too." Another one says, "I'm not rushing into being in love. I'm finding fourth grade hard enough." So, sometimes we have a lot of confusion about what love is. Sometimes we think being in love is actually what love is. And I'm going to suggest to you that there's a different understanding that we have in a spiritual sense about what love is. There was a story of a man who says, "I was hospitalized for a few days, and my wife reported that my dog really missed me, and she spends the night at the front of the door waiting for my return." And he says, "Well, what an example of true love. I wonder if you'd be that concerned about me." And she said, "Honey, if you were out all night, you can bet I'd be waiting at the door." I'm not sure that's real love, but, it could be. It could be. So Eric really has some important understandings about this whole thing about love and what it is and what we are a part of. One of the things, of course, is to recognize that you and I are living life and experiencing life. Whether we understand it or not, whether we realize it or not, we are experiencing life from the within to the without. And this is the key element of the idea and the understanding of what concentrics, the art of concentrics, really is. It's an understanding that we're not living life from the without to the within. We have a tendency to think that life is what's really making us and shaping us. And I'm going to suggest to you that sometimes we get caught up in that belief system, and interestingly enough, because we believe certain things, we oftentimes experience them as being true. And so if you believe that the world is shaping you, you're going to experience being shaped by the world. Do you realize that? But in the very act of doing that, you're participating in concentrics. You're participating in concentrics because in reality what you are believing is being manifest in your experience. And that's something. So he says life oftentimes begins for us with the idea that we somehow come into this world and that we're supposed to be able to gain something by being in this world. And the reality is we are, but we are being brought into this world not necessarily to get, but we're being brought into this world to give something. There's something that is being called forth from each and every one of us. And the reality is it's our true being. It's who and what we are. So one of the things he says is when we live from outside in, life tends to become a matter of things that happen to us, events that occur, things that people say and do. We find that the tone of our lives is completely set from the outside, and more than this, we become other-directed. And we are always in the defensive. We're on the defensive, and anyone has the power to push our buttons of anger, of fear, of hostility. And he goes on to say, this leads to the problem of loneliness and friendlessness. Anybody ever been lonely? Of course, it's a human experience that we all have a tendency to experience. And what he says, though, is that the very lonely people will invariably think that they would not be lonely if people would just be friendlier and kinder and more loving to them. But the fact is that they are lonely because they have lost their center. And so the reality is we get lonely not because there's not someone there loving us, but because we have lost that connection that we have to that essence of our nature, which is divine love. You know, after my divorce, I experienced a lot of loneliness. I really thought I was pretty much alone in the world. And I went through some really difficult and challenging times trying to get love. Remember that old, I was in that good country song Consciousness, looking for love in all the wrong places, looking for love in too many faces. How many ever, you don't have to raise your hand, that's okay. We've all done it. You don't have to raise your hand, we've all done it. We're all doing it in some way. We're trying to see how we can get something or someone out here to love us. And in the very act of doing that, we are actually blocking and cutting ourselves off from love. It's in the very seeking of love that we are actually stopping love in our experiences. Do you realize that? Isn't that amazing to think about? Because see, we are a part of an amazing divine flow. And we are created in the image and after the likeness of the divine. And Scripture tells us that God is love. And they that abide in love, abide in God. What's that word mean, to abide in love? It means to dwell in it. It means to really live in it. To really not only live in it, but it actually means to be of it. See, we're created as love. Of course, the Miracles talks about that. That's what we truly are, that our true nature is actually love. I absolutely believe that. And anything that doesn't look like that is simply a creation and a concoction of our thinking, of our ego mind. We're created in the image and after the likeness of love. And Eric really is helping us to understand that we're lonely because we have frustrated that divine flow. We're lonely because we're not allowing that love to express through us in some way. And in the very act of trying to get someone to love us, we are actually blocking that flow because we are caught up in a belief system that we don't have it. And when you have a belief system that says you don't have it, you're practicing concentrics. Do you realize that? It means that whatever is in here is what you're going to experience out there. So the question was, what does I mean by concentrics? Concentric is very simple. From the within to the without, and not the other way around. And we have the tendency, though, to look at life and experience life from the without to the within. And we're trying to get somehow something to fill up that place in us where we think and feel that we don't have experienced love. But the reality is that's an illusion. Because there's absolutely never been, never has been, never can be, never will be ever a time in your life or experience where you have not been in and as and of the divine, which is love. One of the principles that Eric talks about is that this whole understanding is that wherever God is at all, the whole of God must be, because God is omnipresent, and the whole of God's love must be present at every point in space. The whole of God is present in every point in space. Take a deep breath and recognize that that point in space is right where you are. That divine is right in and of and where you are. You might say that that divine is in the heart of you. It's in every cell of your physical being. It is in every part of your nature. There is absolutely no way that you can truly be separated from that which is everywhere present. And that is what love truly is. It is everywhere present. And so our thinking and belief system that says that we somehow have to go out there and get love is a very belief system that says, I don't have it. And because you have a belief system that says, I don't have it, guess what? You don't have it. You know, the universe is so loving, it'll give you whatever you believe. Do you realize that? It will give you whatever you believe. If you want to believe that you don't have love, oh, okay. You want the experience of not having love. Here you go. Here's some more not having love for you. There's an abundance of not having love available to you. You want some more not having love? Oh, here's some more of it. See, it's a very act of really of thinking that we don't have it that is actually denying its presence. And so part of our work is to really begin to simply notice and acknowledge that we not only have love, but that's really, we can't be separate from it, and our very nature is of that energy, that vibration, that consciousness that love is. To me, that's very powerful and reassuring. Because I tell you, when I went through that period of time when I was looking for love in all the right places, and don't get me wrong, I still occasionally find myself thinking that I really think she needs to be loving me more. Yeah. Don't you guys know what I'm talking about? We have a tendency to do that in all of our relationships, to think that they're supposed to be doing it certain ways, right? There's certain ways that people are supposed to love me. And if they don't love me in the way that I think they're supposed to love me, that means that they're not loving me. And that, if they're not loving me in just the right way, there's no love there. I had some of the most wonderful and loving parents when I was growing up, and I can tell you that many of you probably did as well. Some of you didn't, I realize. But what I understood and came to understand as I got a little older and began to heal in many ways is to recognize that it didn't matter whether you have the most loving parents in the world. When you're little, if they don't love you in the way that you feel you want or need to be loved, you're going to experience that as not being loved. And so we create a program is created in us. We get programmed to believe that we're not loved. And because we get this programming, it runs automatically in our unconscious mind. And so we work with the principles of concentrics. And because we have a belief system in us that says that somehow that we weren't loved back then the way we thought we were supposed to be loved, that we're not loved. And the universe is so amazingly loving and generous, it'll give us all kinds of wonderful opportunities to have that experience over and over again of not feeling loved. But it does it out of love so that you can wake up to an awareness that that's not where love is. It's not in getting it. It's in giving it. And the moment that we shift that consciousness and began to say, regardless of this circumstances, regardless of whether someone is loving me or not, regardless of whether someone is being nice to me or not, regardless of someone is being the way I think they're supposed to be or not, my role here is not to get love, but in a very real way, my role here is to be love. We're here to be love. Just breathe that in a minute. And just say to yourself, I'm here to be love. Now, sometimes that's really easy when we are seeing it out there and feel like we're getting it from others out here in the world. But where we really learn how to be loving is when Jesus teaches us to love our enemies. Wait a minute. Hold it just a second. Do you know what they did? He did, she did. Do you know what they don't do? You know how they're not being? And I can tell you, if we are in any way trying to get others to be the way that we think they are supposed to be, we have automatically cut ourselves off from the divine flow of love. And we're the ones who ultimately are going to feel the hurt of that and the pain of that and the absence of it. When we try to get the world to be the way we think it's supposed to be, we've automatically removed ourselves from truly loving what is. And we're not really tuned into an understanding that there's something at work even greater than our understanding, our intellectual thinking, our ideas, our ego consciousness. That's what the ego really is ultimately. It's really trying to get the world to fit into a particular belief system. Think about that for a moment. When the world doesn't fit our image of how it's supposed to be, we've automatically blocked ourselves from an experience of love. Now, does that mean that we don't try to do things to help bring more love into that experience? Of course we do. But we don't do it by trying to change what is. We do it by trying to emanate more love into that circumstance or situation. When we see someone who is acting out and hurting others, certainly we want to do something to try and change that situation. But one of the things is to recognize that any time we see someone who is hurting others, it's important to recognize that those have been hurt. Those who hurt others are hurt. Do you understand what I'm saying? And trying to demonize and make them somehow Jesus called it the enemy, or he actually called, the term really was the adversary. That which seems adverse to us, or to our way of thinking, or to our way of seeing, or to our way of believing. Now, this is not easy, folks. I'm not saying any of this is easy. I'm just saying it is what rewards us. It is what really helps us to truly not only experience more love in our lives, but it is really what helps us to be that energy of love, not only for ourselves, but in our relationships, in our world, in our politics. Wait a minute now. But they're so wrong. You see, the moment we are addicted, yes, I'm going to say that word. The moment we really find ourselves that we are addicted to being right, we've actually automatically tried to make someone else wrong. And in the very act of doing so, we have actually blocked that energy of love. We, in our wonderful study we've been having, there's a spiritual solution to every problem by Wayne Dyer. He talks about this, and one of the things he points out is that, this whole thing about trying to create right and wrong is really a losing game. In a very real sense, the very act of trying to somehow get others to be the way we think they're supposed to be, is actually blocking us from actually being in the creative flow, being in the creative process. Eric talks about it this way. Let me see if I can get this slide up. He talks about this earlier in one of the lessons. We had this image, and he says that, really what's going on is we have being, which is all of the divine, all that is, all of the creative light and source and is, through the nature of our connection with it, which is we call the Christ in unity, being you. You can say it's your divine nature, your divine self. And so there's this process, and he goes on to say, look at it this way, it is the infinite creativity, being you, it is your potential for success and creative achievement. And so think about it this way also, infinite creativity, infinite love, being you and your potential for infinite love. But it goes in this direction, from the divine, which is within you, out into the world. And the moment that we try to make it the other way around, we are inverting the creative process. When we're trying to get the world out here to be the way we think it's supposed to be, we are actually inverting the creative process. And in the very act of inverting the creative process, we block that flow, and that divine energy and love is not really flowing through us. And we're blocking it not from it coming in, we're blocking it from it going out. And so part of our practice and our work is to be in that flow of allowing love to flow through us. So what does that have to do with work? What does that have to do with work? Well, I'm going to suggest to you that we were brought into this world also to work. And boy, are we a piece of work. And the reality is we are an amazing piece of work when we are in this flow. When we allow ourselves to be in that energy of love and sharing and giving and sending forth, we are amazing creative beings. And we make an amazing difference in our life and our world. And I would suggest that our work, whether it be our employment or just our calling, is what we're here to be and do. Work is really, some of you guys may remember this, but some of our more seasoned folks may remember Dobie Gillis. Remember Dobie Gillis? And remember Maynard G. Krebs. Work! Ah! Anytime someone would mention the word work, he would scream and run. He had a real aversion to it. Maybe some of us have that also. But one of the things that Eric is saying is when we think about our work, we have a tendency, there is a tendency in life, in the world out here, well, to think that work is for a particular purpose, and that purpose is basically to put food on the table, put a roof over our heads, put clothes on our bodies. And one of the things he says that when you are coming at work from that perspective, here's how Ed Wingate says it. She says, if you are working for money, it's the oldest profession in the world. You can take that however you feel like you need to take it. But when we find ourselves simply working to provide in some way, we're actually not really working from that place within us that is that divine nature. And we are actually working, trying to get the world to give us something. And really what we're being called to do is, in whatever work we're doing, pour out into the world. Pour out from within us. And if we're not in a place where we can do that, the reality is you are always in a place you can do that. And he says, well, what if they don't appreciate me? Well, the truth of the matter is, your work isn't there to appreciate you. Your work is there for you to be appreciated. And maybe that sounds like semantics, but when you appreciate yourself, there's a saying that what you appreciate appreciates. And we're talking about appreciating, really what we're talking about is that our work that we do is there to bring out even more of who and what our gifts, our talents, our possibilities, our divine creative achievements. And so whatever work that we're doing, if you do it from a consciousness of trying to let it be... Here, let me show you one more slide. I love this slide. Eric talks about this wonderful painting by Rosenfield, I believe it is. And he calls it's called The Blessing of Work. And if you look at this image and this amazing picture, and this young boy is there working away on this beautiful statue, and he's allowing the creative process to work in and through it. And if you notice that as he's doing that, there's a wonderful choir over here singing his praises. And the beautiful, blessed Madonna is pouring out a blessing on him. What an amazing, wonderful image. And when you are sitting at your desk, or if you're out in the field working, if you got a shovel in your hand, if you have that understanding that whatever you're putting into this is what you are being, it's there to bless you in some way by helping you to allow more of that energy to come forth. Another image that came to me is, you guys are familiar with Abraham's hierarchy of needs, right? And so we have a tendency, the way that hierarchy needs works is our basic needs are our physiological needs, which is food and water and warmth and rest. And then we move up the scale to we need to have needs of safety and security. And when these needs are met, then we feel comfortable, we feel safe in actually trying to meet these needs. And then when these safety needs are met, then we have energy, we have needs of belonging and love, and we will actually have energy for those kinds of needs, to be able to try to fill those kinds of needs. And then when we have these feelings of belongingness and love and needs, we move up into needs of esteem, which is prestige and feelings of accomplishment and, feeling of satisfaction in that way, all the way up into what he calls self-actualization, which is achieving one's full potential, including creative activities. Now, I think this is a really very powerful understanding in many ways, but one of the things that Eric is really talking about in a real sense is that coming from a concentric perspective, when you deal with and you're talking about your work, he's actually suggesting that we flip this. And that if you come from a place of really trying to really be all that you can be in your work, you will find that you have a greater sense of accomplishment. And as you have a greater sense of accomplishment, you'll also feel more of the experiences of belonging and feeling loved. And if you are in that place, you're going to feel more safe. And actually, interestingly enough, your physical needs are actually going to be met even more by coming at it from that perspective. So we have a tendency to go to work to try and get the paycheck. But the reality is, we go to work to try and be all that we truly can be. The paycheck becomes the gravy on top of whatever's going on in life. This is true where you're working for yourself or where you're working for another organization, for another company. See, the reality is, one of the things he points out in the book is that oftentimes young people ask the question when they are in school or get out of school, what kind of job should I look for? And sometimes, the question really comes up, well, shouldn't I look for a job with a future in it? And one of the phrases that I heard Eric read him, and I also heard him say some years ago in a talk, he said, there really is no future in a job. Do you realize that? There's no future in a job. The future is in you. And if the future is in you, it is in you allowing your unique divine nature to be expressed through whatever work you're doing. And so if you can really think about what work you're doing today, ask the question, how can I really be in a consciousness of giving into my work in such a way that I'm expressing more of my possibility and potential? And in the very act of doing that, the universe, there's a law that works. What's that saying? What you put out, you get back. As you sow, you reap. It really makes a difference in what happens in your life and world. I've been in ministry for quite a few years, and I love doing ministry. But I've also done other things. And for many years, actually for about 7 years, I worked at at the largest software manufacturer in the world. And it was a great experience. And I learned a lot of things, and I found that I was developing parts of myself that I had not really developed before. I'd really been much more in the people business and really thinking more. I was much more right brain, but it gave me an opportunity to actually work, get old left brain working over here, and to really think about things in a logical, rational way. And so I was working in technology, and there was a lot of technical information that I needed to learn, and it was really a really good experience. And then I reached a place where I realized I was burning about 10 candles at both ends at once, and realized that there's so much that I could do, and it was starting to affect my health, and I knew that I needed to make changes. So the question really came to me, which way am I going to go? Am I going to go over in this area of work that I know is extremely financially rewarding, and it was, and it is, or am I going to go over into this area of work where I knew that I was really going to be giving from my heart and what I loved and what I knew was my passion, and helping people to really develop themselves spiritually. And I have to say, honestly, I struggled with it, because I kind of like making a really good living. I'll be honest with you. That's the truth. I like the comfort of that. But what really occurred to me is that I knew that I could only do that for so long before I knew that something in me would die. Because I knew it wasn't what my passion was, and I knew it wasn't where I was being fed spiritually. And so I made the choice, and it has been a magnificent choice. And I can tell you that I feel so blessed that I have been able to make that choice. I'm not saying that it's the same choice that you need to make. I mean, there are people who absolutely love doing the technical work. It is their love and their passion. Our son Ian was actually in a field where he was actually doing a lot of pricing and analyzing numbers and doing those sort of things, and realized that he just didn't want to do that kind of thing anymore. So he's going back to school to become an engineer. And he's studying engineering. And he's doing fantastic, loving the work, loving the studies, loving what he's doing. And I'm really proud of him for really just listening to where he feels like his passion is, where he can give of himself. And so I'm going to invite you to really think about not necessarily changing careers. You can do that if you want, but changing consciousness about whatever work that you're doing. And listen to how the question, what is it that is within me that's being called forth? You see, we all have a calling. Someone says, well, what if I'm unemployed? The reality is, you're never truly unemployed. You see, we all have one employer. Think about it. We all have one employer. That one employer is the divine. And that one employer is always ready to give us a raise. There's a story that Eric talks about. A man came to work one day and got an envelope on his desk and opened up, and there's a note, and it says, we have a really big raise in store for you that becomes effective as soon as you do. The universe has a huge raise in store for every one of us. The moment we become even more effective at expressing who and what we truly are and our gifts in whatever we're doing. And that's a form of love as well. So that's our lessons for the week. So homework for you this week: love, give it, love your work, be love in your work, and have fun with it. You might as well. You might as well. All right, let's move into our meditation time. So we move into that comfortable stillness, that peace, that place within us where we are in tune with and connected with and aligned with our oneness, that one power, that one presence that is love. And our meditation today is based on the prayer of St. Francis of Assisi. Just let these words resonate in your heart. Lord, make me an instrument of thy peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. And where there is sadness, joy. O Divine Master, grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive. It is in pardoning that we are pardoned. It is in dying to self that we are born to eternal life. Just breathe that into your heart space. And just express that willingness to sow love. Take a nice deep breath. Let your awareness be in this room, this time and place, emanating from your heart and radiating that truth of divine love that you are. And give thanks that we live in a circular universe, and knowing that as we send it out, it's already on its way back. And so it is. Take a nice deep breath. Let your awareness be in this room, this time and place. Take one more nice deep breath, and when you're ready, gently open your eyes.